Welcome to this edition of Smart Levers. Ramanan, today we want to talk about bright spots. So, are we going into solar, astronomy or something like that?
Yeah. Well, think about this way, right? Each time someone comes to you with a problem, there's always a complaint. Like, in our case, most of it are these problems related to culture and teams, and people will say that my team is really not behaving the way I think they should behave. So it's almost like forget the solar and astronomy. They're living in a world of gloom where, like in that Douglas Adams story, the a cloud is always following them, and everywhere they say they cannot see anything but doom and gloom. And so the idea behind a bright spot is that oftentimes we're so fixated on what is not working that we fail to pay attention to what may be working. Maybe it's in a small corner, maybe it's just 1% of the space that you're looking at. But a bright spot is a bright spot. It is that little peak of sunlight through that cloud that is following you. And so this idea comes from the book Switch that I think we've spoken about it in a previous episode of the
Right.
Smart Levers. And the Switch framework is a 9-part framework that looks at the situation as a rational rider, the emotional elephant, and the environmental path around it. And so they introduce the idea of bright spots, which is that when the rider needs to be motivated to make progress, to kind of grapple with change, uh, one place to start is to maybe look at data, maybe look at anecdotes, and find one or two instances where things are working as you planned. A good example could be, let's say, I want people in a team to be more curious, and I'm a little unhappy that 8 out of 10 of them do not read, do not follow, interesting people on social media, don't really bring anything to the table when it comes to curiosity. But then I forget that there are those two people who are sort of the bright spots in this case. And so that's the notion that start with something which is a spot. Even if it is a spot, it's bright. Let's begin our investigation of how to change from it.
Right. I think what the most powerful thing that comes out of that is that it is possible. In your example, those two people are doing something, so it's not something that you are demanding or expecting, which is impossible. So now it's just a question of figuring out what are they doing differently and seeing how more people can do that. Is that right?
Absolutely. So I would say it's like being a detective of change and starting your investigation, first of all, by asking why are these people doing what they do? Is it something very intrinsic? Have they overcome a situation by sheer will? So, to give you an example, and we do this every time someone comes to us with a problem, which we reframe it and we ask them to focus on the positive. So, for instance, at one point, someone asked us to help with an innovation program, and one of the ways to unlock that problem and get more people to participate is to first ask, without having offered any incentive, without having changed the environment in any way, who is already doing the kinds of behaviors that leads to innovation? Who are the people who are networking with different groups of people, who are bringing ideas, who cannot be stopped even if you try hard to stop them. And that's where you go and you can talk to them. You can maybe do a little bit of a survey. You can try and understand what motivates them, what are the tools that they have, what are the frameworks they follow, who are their inspirations, and then you use that intelligence to slowly chip away at all the other people. So some people may look at bright spots as early adopters in that sense of the term, but in some sense bright spots are already living the life that you want everyone else to live, and now you're trying to just start bridging that gap and slowly take people across the bridge to where the bright spots are, by learning from and then scaling the ideas from the bright spots.
Right. And does this concept of bright spots also again come in handy in the context of culture stories and culture repository that we spoke about in earlier episodes?
Right. So people who have watched those episodes, they will recall that we spoke about these stories and these repositories as being something you can use to influence other people. So, and we also spoke about where will these stories come from? So what is the seed capital for your repository in some sense, right? So these bright spots are your starting points. If you have a group of people and you want to, I'm sure it's not the case that no one is living the culture that you have set out to be. If it is so, then it's a different problem. You first need to maybe articulate your culture through a manifesto and all those kinds of things. But assuming that in steady state people are living the culture, but a lot of it is happening at a very invisible level. Some people are happy to talk about their contributions, or their contributions are such that they cannot be hidden. And so that's the place where you will probably go and talk to them, capture their story. They are almost like influencers in your inside your organization. So you capture them, capture their story. How did they help a customer? How did they invent something? And you put that into your culture repository. And so you are now hoping for a snowball effect. You're hoping for more people to look at that, say, you know what, even I behave like this. So maybe I can also come and talk about my story because they're creating that environment that is there. The other is that for some people, certain values may be very aspirational. So, for example, we want to be innovative, we want to be very open in the way we speak, but that's something that doesn't come very naturally to us. So these people are setting the template. How do I do it? So if that person can do it, and it's not as if I'm saying there is this Nobel Prize winning scientist in a research lab who's being innovative. I'm seeing someone here, flesh and blood, someone I know, someone who sort of looks like me, does the kind of things I do. So can I learn from it? The gap is so much more lesser and so much easier to overcome, that I take inspiration from that person. So the bright spot is a very important part of any culture repository seeding process.
Right. So this is great, Raman. Just I have a more practical question here. So think of our audience, the uplevelers. They have probably identified these bright spots, right? Those two people. What next? What should they do next so that others can get that inspiration? Is it about, say, doing a podcast with them, capturing their story, also studying how they have done? What should they do next?
Yeah, I think we live in a world where there is just so many things that you can do. So, like you mentioned, doing a podcast with them, just having a conversation with them and recording that conversation is also good enough. So, by now, a lot of organizations should be thinking about setting up these regular channels of engagement uh, where different groups of people come together. Sometimes it's the entire company, sometimes just all the managers. And so these become stages that you can invite these bright spots on and give them that opportunity to talk about it. Maybe there'll be two, some of them may not have the interest or the inclination to come and write a presentation and then talk about themselves and say how great they are. So you might just be that person who's the moderator, the facilitator, put that mic in front of them, ask them those 5 questions and elicit something that you can share with everyone else. So that's why your example of the podcast is good, because that's what very good podcasts always do. They give a stage, they ask the right questions, and they bring something for the audience to use, which if you can capture the recording and maybe a short post can go into your culture repository. So what I would advise the leaders is that one, uh, you always have some idea of who the bright spots are already. And so you use that to go and talk to them, and you figure out some kind of a platform for them. Maybe it is an ask me anything style interaction, which you invite other people to come and participate in. It could be this podcast style interview, it could be helping them to capture their story and using your people's operation folks to publish that internally or even externally on LinkedIn, and encouraging this person to talk about and share those ideas. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of people listening to this may themselves be bright spots. And so they may sometimes feel a little shy of humble bragging. But if you are one of those two people yourselves and you want to create that snowball effect, then you must step up and talk a little bit about what you do, how you do it. Because there is always a silent audience in a community. And that silent audience is hungry for things like these. But sometimes you don't know that, and you're worried that you'll be perceived as being overly sort of bragging about your achievements. But I'm sure the advantages or the benefits far outweigh all these other factors.
Right. I think, I'll go out on a limb, Ramanan, to say that anyone who's watching this and has watched the rest of the series is definitely curious to know more about things like mental models and what are these smart levers that can help them up level as well as their teams, right? So there are definitely, kind of people, who should be talking about themselves, and they owe it to themselves and their teams to do more of things like this. So I think that's a good prescriptive note that we are ending this particular episode on. So thanks a lot, Ram.